Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition, a very playoff edition of the DFO DFS show. I'm Brock Seguin. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I wasn't exactly sure how many people would tune into a playoff DFS episode. I mean, there are still lots of games, lots of good contests, so I figured it'd be decent turnout, and so far so good. Also, the fact that it's earlier than normal. So just before we jump into tonight's slate. I do plan to continue to do these DFO DFS shows throughout at least the first round, as long as we've got 2 or 3, 4 games each night. I'll be doing these shows. The nights where we go down to one game, I obviously won't be doing that. I know you've probably noticed that already in the past. So just kind of a heads up as to where we will be going from here. Tonight we've got 3 games, 1 game 2, 2 game 1s. If they're anything like we've seen here in the first couple days of the postseason, we should be in for another great action-packed night. Obviously, a couple overtime games already. That Florida-Tampa game yesterday was absolutely electric. Everything it was hyped up to be, so that's going to be a great series. But a nice Monday slate tonight, so let's get right into it. No, Calgary, Vancouver games anymore. I mean, at least until tomorrow, but at least nothing, tonight. I just can't believe those games are even happening. But if you're new to the show, obviously, if you didn't tune into any of the regular season episodes, feel free to drop any questions or comments in the chat. I'll get to them as I go along. And then, all the DFO, DFS, premium stuff is still available on dailyfaceoff.com. So if you want to sign up now, even if it's just for the week to get access to all this information, you can do that for as little as $9.99 a week. Peter B said, would not miss a show unless I can't help it. Keep it going. Sounds good. I will, as long as there's more Peter B's out there, I will keep it rolling. But all right, let's start with the first game, which is Washington game 2 against the Bruins. The Bruins have an implied total of 3. Washington coming in at 2.6. Obviously, it's a little bit of a bizarre situation going on with the Capitals right now. You've got, Evgeny Kuznetsov still not really ready to play. Ilya Samsonov still kind of not really ready to play. I don't really know what's going on there. It's very bizarre. But then with Vitek Vanacek getting hurt in game 1, Craig Anderson obviously stepped in and played pretty well, giving them the overtime win. But he's going to start tonight. At least it looks like it. A bit of a bizarre situation with the Capitals. So I think that's why you see the line moving even more in the favor of the Bruins here since that information dropped. But Bruins 1 and Bruins 2 both look really good at the top of this game. Realistically, they played pretty well in game 1. I know I saw a lot of Bruins fans, kind of upset at the lack of, getting pucks to the net, especially against a goalie like Craig Anderson, who's barely played this season. So, from a Bruins side of things, hopefully we see a little bit more of a shoot first mentality tonight than we did in game 1. Overall, though, the top 2 lines for the Bruins played pretty well. The Bruins top line carried a 60% Corsi for, second line at 56% Corsi for. It was really the depth of the Bruins that hurt them in that contest. So I wouldn't shy away from Boston 2 or Boston 1 tonight. We'll dive a little bit more into the matchups there. But both performed pretty admirably in game 1. I'd expect them to, be solid again tonight. In terms of the matchup, it's going to be a lot of that top line, the Backstrom, Ovechkin, Mantha line going up against David Krejci's line. That turns into roughly 41% of Krejci's ice time will be against the top line of the Capitals and 43% for Backstrom's line. More of a hard match from the Lars Eller line. They're going up primarily against the Patrice Bergeron line, 60% of their ice time. So pretty easy game to break down from kind of a matchup standpoint. Obviously, it's not a 100% hard match like we see here kind of from the Carolina game, like 89% of the fourth line's minutes. But still pretty, it looks like, the Capitals will try to get their matchups that they want. They're going to try to get Eller out there against Bergeron as much as possible with last change. So how that looks, obviously Boston 1, Boston 2, very, very solid numbers throughout the course of the regular season, both averaging well over 32 scoring chances, 4 per 60, double-digit high danger chances. The Corsi 4 percentage is both both above 65%, which is just outrageous. So 2 extremely good lines. The top line for the Capitals has been really good defensively thus far. Their offensive numbers aren't that impressive. They play kind of a lower tempo game, slow things down a little bit. So the Defensively, they're pretty solid. So matchup-wise there doesn't look that appealing for Boston 2, a little bit more of a difficult matchup for them as opposed to Boston 1 going up against this Lars Eller line. That Eller line's still pretty good. To be certain, the offensive numbers very similar to the top line for the Capitals. The defensive numbers, though, just a little bit worse. So, we're basically splitting hairs in this game, but on a 3-game slate, you really kind of have to. So the matchup definitely looks a little bit better for Boston 1 going up against that Eller Raffle Connor Sheary line. So if you're debating, who to play, I would probably roll with Boston 1 over Boston 2 tonight, but I do still like Boston 2 quite a bit. Obviously, it all boils down to what you're doing. If you're building one lineup or you're building multiple lineups. If you're building multiple lineups, I think you're going to want to have exposure to both of these lines tonight. Obviously pretty solid performance from Craig Anderson in game 1, but I'm not putting too much stock into that. This is a guy that has barely played hockey this season, getting way up there in age, hasn't been that great in recent years. So to imagine that he comes in and just steals the show here in game 2, I think is pretty difficult to imagine. David Krejci is the type of guy who has really, always kind of elevated his game in the playoffs. So if you want to go a little bit more down the narrative street, then I think Boston 2 makes sense. So it just all depends what you're doing. I think if you're only building one lineup, I think Boston 1 would be preferred to Boston 2. But depending where else you want to go, obviously that changes things as well. But I really do like both lines for them. As for the Capitals, it's very difficult to get to find a line that I love, simply because the top 2 lines are going to be going head to head with the top 6 of the Bruins, which, as I mentioned, are outstanding. Their Corsi 4, they're of 65%, makes it very difficult to really get anything going offensively. So it's a little bit more difficult to target the top 6 of the Capitals. But if we take a look here at Washington 3, they're going to see a little bit more of that third line, a little bit more of that fourth line. So the bottom 6 of the Bruins, which is much worse defensively, specifically that third line. So I think that might be an interesting way to target the Capitals tonight. I'm not in love with it. Overall, I'm not, over the moon with the Capitals tonight, but, obviously they pulled out a win in game 1. They could certainly do it again in game 2, but Daniel Sprong's played really, really well this year. TJ Oshie in the middle, maybe not quite as appealing as he is on the wing, but overall this third line is pretty good. Obviously, you still get top power play exposure with TJ Oshie, and then you got Tom Wilson on the second unit. So I think they're an interesting line to target in this game just because the matchup is so much better than what you're going to see out of the top 6 for the Capitals. If we take a look back at last game, the top line did a tremendous job, 70.83 Corsi 4. So if they continue to roll like they did in that game, then I think obviously, you could go back to them. But that Eller line going to have their hands full, obviously, with Boston 2. And then, hopefully the third line can do a little bit of damage against the bottom 6 of the Bruins. So, if you look, obviously, I think that the top line's got the most upside heading into tonight's game. If they're able to do anything like they were able to do in game 1, they'll be fine. But I definitely wouldn't be looking to play that Eller line going up against the Bergeron line. They're going to have a difficult task all night long. But if Washington 1 can continue to somehow get the better of this Boston 2 line, then obviously they'll be in play tonight. But I still like Boston 2's chances, especially with Craig Anderson. So I'm leaning more towards the Bruins side of things, but you can definitely sprinkle in Washington 1. They fully correlate on the top power play unit, which makes them intriguing. So if you're mass entering lineups tonight, definitely have a little bit of exposure to them because it's hard to get lines that fully correlate on the top power play unit, obviously. But I think Washington 3 would be my second choice here, and a pretty solid value option if we go back here to the salaries. TJ Oshie only $4,700, $4,400 for Tom Wilson, $3,800 for Daniel Sprong. You can full stack them for $12,900, so super cheap, and a pretty good matchup with the Bruins bottom 6 as opposed to going up against their absolute, mammoth top 6. All right, we're going to move now to the second game. Obviously, a little bit less to go off of, considering this is a game 1 as opposed to a game 2. But the Hurricanes come in as favorites. Obviously, 3.1 implied total for them, 2.5 for the Predators. The Carolina Hurricanes are a team that obviously are just tremendous at 5v5. They're pretty good on the power play as well. The Predators, though, have really come on strong in the last month and a half, 2 months of the season. They've been outstanding. They've kind of found their identity as being this big, heavy team that is difficult to play against, and then obviously pretty stingy defensively. Most of that kind of falling on the shoulders of UC Saros, who's been absolutely lights out for months. So, like, I guess the first place I should start with this game is for the Predators. So they are going to get Victor Arvidsson back tonight. They did not run like a any line rushes this morning, but they did tweet out a projected lineup, and it didn't feature Eeli Tolvanen, which is a bit surprising to me. Obviously, I think that, as I mentioned, they've kind of found their identity through kind of this heavy hockey. They'll get Matthew Olivier back. So, you thought maybe that would mean Tanner Jeannot comes out of the lineup. It looks like it's actually going to elevate Jeannot. Olivier is going to take his spot on the fourth line as they continue to kind of play that rugged style of hockey and try to, wear the Hurricanes down. So, yeah, it's a bit surprising that Tolvanen comes out, especially because their power play sucks, and he's really the only guy that seems to be able to score on the power play for them. So, yeah, I think that is a bit of a mistake, in my opinion. I probably would have found a way to keep him in and bolster that third line with Howland and Duchesne, whether that means dropping, Arvidsson or dropping Forsberg down there. Obviously would have been the decision they had to make, but scratching Tolvanen to me is a bit of a head scratcher for me. They also will be scratching Dante Fabro, which, we've kind of seen coming here in the last, couple weeks of the season. But Alexander Carrier seems to have really jumped him as the number 4 defenseman for the Predators. So some, peculiar lineup decisions here, but obviously they kind of have found their identity, and they're going to want to continue to play that style of hockey. So this is what we've got. This is these are the lines that I've, used for these projections. So Carolina wanted to jump off the page tonight. Carolina 1 specifically looks outstanding. Carolina 2 looks pretty good as well. Carolina 3 slightly below average, but we'll get into them a little bit in a second. Nashville 1 looks like the best option from the Predators. That Nashville 3 line continues to look okay. So I don't know what the Hurricanes are doing either, to be honest with you. Rod Brind'Amour likes to do this. He did it a lot during the regular season. Move Andrei Svechnikov down with Jordan Staal, really kind of lengthens their lineup, makes them a little bit deeper. Against a team like the Predators, who are also pretty deep, it makes sense, I suppose. But obviously, tons of success with Svechnikov, Aho, and Teravainen. They'll break them up at least to start. Nino will go up with Aho and Teravainen. Fogle on the second line with Trocheck and Netchas. Svechnikov down with Staal and Fast. So obviously, from a DFS perspective, it makes this team a lot more difficult to stack. We'll, create some interesting lineup decisions, whether or not you want a full stack or mini stack. Some of these lines is going to be kind of the answers you're going to have to come up with when you're building your lineups. But let's talk now about the matchups. We'll start, obviously, with Carolina 1. So pretty easy game to break down in terms of the matchups. Carolina 1 will go up primarily against that Mikael Granlund line. They'll see their fair share of the third line as well. The Trocheck line will go up again, basically against the middle six. Same matchup as Carolina 1. They'll just see a little bit more, or a lot more of the third line as opposed to the second line, but they'll see a decent, about a quarter of their ice time against that second line. You'll see in a second that whether or not you face the second or the third line for the Predators doesn't really matter. They're both shit defensively. So it's a great matchup for both of those lines. Carolina 3, the Staal line, will go up almost exclusively against the top line of the Predators. So that would be Johansson, Forsberg, Arvidsson. Then the fourth lines will just duke it out in a heavy affair. So as I mentioned, Nashville's middle six, just horrendous defensively. Specifically that third line. Obviously, I've mentioned that they're pretty good, are really good offensively, but they just play the most up-tempo style of hockey. They, just pond hockey, basically, just going out there freewheeling. They generate an absolute shitload of chances, 37.5 scoring chances, 4 per 60, but they give up the exact same amount. So, whenever they're on the ice, it should make for some exciting hockey, especially considering the fact that they're going up against a Carolina 2 line that, not quite to the same extent, but they're also pretty freewheeling as well. 26 scoring chances, 4 per 60, 28 scoring chances against per 60. So when those two team lines are on the ice together, which they will be almost 50% of the time against each other, it should make for some very up-tempo, exciting hockey. So, obviously it doesn't really matter whether or not you're seeing Nashville 2 or Nashville 3. It's a great matchup either way. So now which one would I rather target from the Hurricane side of things? The usage is pretty similar, but Carolina 1 just seems to be much better offensively. Trocheck specifically, obviously, was really, really good in the early portion of the season, but that line with Netchas and Niederreiter really has cooled off. Trocheck comes into the playoffs, pretty much ice cold. So I don't know if I have a whole lot of interest there, at least in game one. I think that, if you're building a lot of lineups and you want to go more contrarian, I think that they're a really interesting contrarian option. They should be much lower owned than some of these other big lines. And they obviously, with the matchup, they have the potential to absolutely go off tonight and just kind of get the postseason started off on the right foot. Obviously, it doesn't always matter what you did at the end of the regular season. It's what you can do here in the postseason. So I think that they're a really nice contrarian option, but I definitely want to have a little bit more of Carolina 1. They just come in playing much better hockey. Sebastian Aho obviously has proven to be a pretty good playoff performer throughout his young career. So in a primo matchup with Nashville 2 and Nashville 3, they should absolutely go off tonight. I love both Carolina 1 and 2, but Carolina 1 especially, it looks just outstanding. For the third line with Svechnikov, they just don't provide quite the same floor. The matchup obviously isn't quite as good either. So it's a little bit more difficult to go to the Stahl Aho or Stahl Svechnikov mini stack. But they're another contrarian option. I think the Aho Teravainen are going to carry much higher ownership. And you still get top power play exposure from Stahl and Svechnikov. So if you wanted to, again, go a little bit more contrarian, go with some lower owned players, a lower owned approach, then Stahl and Svechnikov make sense from that perspective. But overall, the matchup just is not quite as good, although it's not bad either. Nashville 1, pretty solid all in all, but they do give up their fair share, another up-tempo style of play there. They give up their fair share of chances. So Svechnikov obviously is talented enough where he doesn't really need that many chances to convert. Obviously the Hurricanes I mentioned, they're really, really good. The way this lineup is currently constructed, and this is why I was kind of alluding to, I'm not in love with this lineup because certain ways they've been able to construct these lines throughout the season, they look unbelievable, where it's like they're just dominant offensively and giving up next to nothing defensively. But then they always go back to this layout and it just doesn't work the same. It's not surprising that Svechnikov drops down to Stahl and Stahl's defensive numbers take a hit. Especially with them matching up, hard matching against the top line of the Predators, you'd think you'd want to make that line maybe as tough two-way to play against as possible, but dropping Svechnikov down obviously doesn't do that. So it's a bit interesting. So for me, I do like Nashville 1 a little bit tonight. The matchup is obviously okay with that Stahl line, with Svechnikov on the wing, not really giving up a decent amount of chances, 26.4 scoring chances against 11 high dangers. So the matchup, isn't as bad as it could be if Rod Brind'Amour had elected to go with maybe some different lines. So I do think that there's a little bit of interest there in Nashville 1. I mentioned about Sebastian Aho's obviously been a guy that's been, pretty productive in the postseason throughout his career. The same can be said about Ryan Johansson. Really not a guy that gets it done in the regular season, but once the bright lights of the playoffs start, he seems to be much better. He's got a career, almost a career point per game player in the postseason, 0.92. So at just 3,400, he's pretty interesting from that perspective. If he continues kind of his postseason ways, and then obviously, pretty cheap at 3,400. As I mentioned, 4,800 for Arvidsson is very cheap. I'd imagine that'll go up as the playoffs continue. And then Forsberg just 6,000. It's they might not ever be cheaper than they are tonight. And if they can get off to a nice start, then there's reason to think that they should have a pretty good night against that Stahl line. Would not mind picking Duchesne as a winger with Haula, but DK is not having it today. Yeah. So we'll get to that line here now. So they're going to go primarily against the second line, as I mentioned, the Trocheck line. So the Trocheck line, is by far not by far, but is, on paper, the worst defensive line that the Hurricanes have. And then obviously these numbers are really crazy. I mean, we've seen these third line numbers out of some lines throughout the course of the season, whether it be Colorado 3, Ottawa 3 at times had just outrageous numbers. And then they slowly start to come back down to earth. This isn't the case with this Nashville 3 line. They're ridiculous. They generate chances like crazy, but they just, don't always seem to capitalize on all of them. But you're really not taking that big of a gamble with them because they're super cheap. So Hala at 3,300, Duchesne at 3,000 is very reasonably priced, and you can take a stab at them. But as Peter B mentioned, Duchesne listed as a center on DraftKings right now, so that's kind of unfortunate. It makes it a little bit more difficult to mini stack them tonight. But if you get creative enough, you can definitely do it. You can almost stack Carolina 1 and Nashville 1 in Showdown. Yep, that's definitely pretty interesting. I almost took down the Tampa Bay Florida Showdown last night. I think I ended up 8th, but I was 2nd with like 4 minutes left in that Braden Point goal. If Stamkos would have scored the winner, I would have won $5K last night, but wasn't to be had. But yeah, I basically stacked Tampa Bay's power play and Florida 2 full stack together. And then obviously that worked out very well. So if you can full stack Carolina 1 and Nashville 1 together on Showdown, I think that's probably a pretty good option without question. It looks like, probably the 2 highest scoring lines from both teams, right? You just have to hope that maybe Alex Nedeljkovic doesn't stand on his head and Nashville 1 actually gets it done. So I talked a lot about Aho, Teravainen. And again, if you're new to the show, I'm breaking these games down a little bit more than I normally would because we have time. There's only 3 games. So if I'm boring you, I apologize, but we might as well break it down as much as we can because we have a half hour usually. So if you want a mini stack, Aho, Teravainen, that's fine. If you want to include Niederreiter, I think that's a really good option. I like Niederreiter a lot more than maybe Warren Foegele, but Fogel's probably a guy, Warren Fogel's also a guy that's had pretty good success through his, short playoff tenure as well. So I think a lot of people will see these lines and probably elect for the mini stack tonight. So I think if you full stack them, it's probably going to differentiate yourselves from the field. I think, maybe not so much Niederreiter, but I think a lot of people will elect to, maybe leave a Warren Foegele off tonight. Tanner Jeannot will almost certainly be left off. I don't think anybody will even play Nashville 3, but, Jesper Fast will be left off of a Carolina 3 stack. So I think full stacking will probably differentiate you a little bit with some of these lines. And I think a case can be made for certainly playing Niederreiter at 4,000 and Warren Foegele at 2,800. So full stacking them seems to be in order. I did forget to go to the power play report in the first game. So you'll notice I removed the penalties taken, shorthanded chances each game, power plays per game, because in the playoffs, it's pretty relevant. It's usually very few penalties are called. It's very difficult to project how many penalties there might be in a game. So I've basically just completely removed that from the equation. Just put the power plays head to head with the opponent's penalty kill to see what we could get. So it looks a little bit different today, but pretty much provides us with the same thing, but now just you have to imagine that they're all on a level playing field. So the Bruins come in looking okay on the power play, slightly below average, but a lot of these numbers take a hit because Colorado's power play advantage is so massive. The Bruins power play all season has not been nearly as good as without Torrey Krug. The Capitals penalty kill is pretty good. So overall, the Bruins power play, obviously not something that's, jumping off the charts, but they have pretty, they're obviously, they fully correlate, the top line fully correlates on one power play unit. The second line fully correlates in the other unit. So it doesn't really matter. You're not really building like a Bruins power play stack anyway. You're kind of stacking them at 5v5. The Capitals power play has not been all that great. The Bruins have the second best penalty kill on tonight's slate. So again, the Capitals don't look all that great. But with Alexander Ovechkin, you can always score a couple power play goals at any given time. So that whole line fully correlates on top power play unit. So if you're playing them, you're kind of just hoping for the best in the power play. It will be just kind of a cherry on top. As for the second game, the Hurricanes power play is grades out as the second best power play on tonight's slate. Second best power play overall, second best power play advantage as well. Overall, the Predators are pretty good on the kill. They grade out right around average tonight, but their power play is atrocious, and the Hurricanes penalty kill is great. So another reason why it looks like the Hurricanes should be able to win this series and win this game, especially here to start off, up 1-0. Big power play advantage. Looks like they've got the advantage at 5v5 as well. So that's why they're pretty heavy favorites coming tonight. And then while we're here, I might as well talk about the third game. We'll move to that 5v5 in a second. But from a power play perspective, Colorado, a huge advantage. They have by far the best power play on tonight's slate. And then the St. Louis Blues have the worst penalty kill on tonight's slate as well. So looks like obviously just a massive advantage for the Blues or for the Avalanche. And they've already, they already come into this game or this series with a huge advantage at 5v5 as well. So a lot of people obviously picked the Avalanche to not only win this round but win the Stanley Cup and or at least get that far, and for good reason. They're just an absolute stud team. Get a lot of their bodies back tonight as well, so they're looking pretty good. Meanwhile, you got the Blues without David Perron, Vince Dunn, so they're shorthanded. But overall, their power play is actually not bad. The Avalanche penalty kill hasn't been all that great, so there is maybe a chance for the Blues to get on the board tonight on the power play. But they're mostly going to struggle at 5v5 throughout this entire series. Speaking of 5v5, where's my mouse? Okay. So yeah, now Colorado won by far and away the best line to target in this game. Colorado 2, Colorado 3, both okay. Colorado 2 much better, looks a little bit better than Colorado 3. All of St. Louis grades out below average. We'll get to that in a second. Matchups. Basically going to be Colorado 1, just going up against the top 9 of the Blues. The second line, we'll see a little bit more of St. Louis 2, but we'll, not really any hard matching going on. The third line will go up almost exclusively against the Ryan O'Reilly line. And then they'll see a little bit of the fourth line as well. And then the fourth line will just completely avoid Ryan O'Reilly and see the bottom 9 of the Blues. So a little bit more of a difficult game to break down. These matchups are obviously kind of just what we saw in the regular season. So in the playoffs, they could change a little bit. They could elect to go for more hard matching. So that could change, next time we talk and we break down the matchups from game 1 going into game 2. But this is what they did in the regular season. So yeah, I think it'll probably be pretty close to this. There might be a little bit more hard matching going on, but overall, so that's all we got. So, the Ryan O'Reilly line is by far the Blues' best defensive line. And before I get into all the numbers, I do just want to show you the Blues lineup with no David Perron. So they will get Vladdy Tarasenko back tonight, but without Perron, they're going to completely remake this lineup. Jaden Schwartz and Braden Shen move up to the top line with Ryan O'Reilly. Ivan Barbashev now drops down to the second line with Bozak and Tarasenko. The third line of Hoffman, Thomas, Kyrou gets reunited. So that's what the Blues will look like on the power play. Pretty simple. Tarasenko moves up into Perron's spot, takes that over. And then obviously on the second power play unit, we've got Kyrou, Schwartz, Thomas, and Bozak with Justin Falk. So changes things a little bit for them, but not, no massive changes. All players that have played together this season and have familiarity there. So going up, this O'Reilly line has been really good defensively with Shen and Schwartz. The problem is you'd think that they'd be pretty good offensively, but they are not. They've just been so boring. I mean, this is Corsi for and Corsi against, and it's just the lowest volume hockey ever. So yeah, the offensive spunk definitely is not quite there without David Perron. Their offensive numbers with Perron aren't that tantalizing, but they're much better than this. So I just don't really think I can go there tonight. But they're so good defensively that it kind of takes Colorado 3 out of the equation. Colorado 3 usually one of my favorite value options, but in that matchup, 52% of the Colorado 3's ice time going up against O'Reilly, it's going to be a difficult task for them. As I mentioned, Colorado 1 will see a little bit of that O'Reilly line, but they will see almost 70% of their ice time will be up against the middle 6 of the Blues, which is by far the 2 worst defensive lines. So the matchup doesn't get much better. On home ice, this is going to be a huge advantage for the McKinnon line, avoiding Ryan O'Reilly. Once the series shifts back to St. Louis, it could be a little bit closer because they'll be able to get O'Reilly out there against McKinnon. But in Colorado, they should have a massive advantage getting McKinnon out there against Bozak, especially while Perron's out. But getting him out there against Bozak and Robert Thomas, McKinnon should have plenty of success. So obviously Colorado won the top option on the slate tonight. Really, really good matchup for them there. But I also really like this second line as well. Obviously, they're going to see still some ice time against the O'Reilly line, but they're going to see a lot of the second line. 37% of their ice time coming against that Bozak line, 24% against the fourth line. The fourth line's okay. Not great, though. Still only a 48% Corsi for. Not quite as good a matchup as the third line. But overall, anything against this bottom nine is pretty good for the Avalanche. And that second line looks pretty good. They get Brandon Saad back tonight. Overall, the numbers have been pretty solid this year. Obviously, 60% Corsi for, 64% expected goals for percentage is outstanding, 27 scoring chances, 12 high danger. Really, really good numbers across the board. Also very good defensively for Colorado too. So the reason I like them, obviously, Kadri, pretty good playoff performer in his time as well. I'm not one that usually goes down the narrative streak, but in the playoffs, it is a little different. Like we saw like a guy like Jean-Gabriel Pageau last night. Like all of a sudden he's just a stud again. It's like, oh, it's playoff Pageau. He's back. So I think that there is something to be said, especially in game one here where we're kind of just trying to figure things out. I will probably lean back on some past playoff performances to see who's kind of stepped up at this time of year. And Kadri and Burakovsky are certainly two of those guys. Kadri with 1.2 points per game and Burakovsky with 1.13 points per game over recent years in the postseason. So at 5,400 for Kadri, 5,100 for Burakovsky, really nice price. And then you get Brandon Saad back in line. He's just 2,600, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So if we take a look now as well at the power play units, they fully correlate. I think that's going to keep playing stupid videos. Can't wait to remove those next year. They fully correlate on the second power play unit. Is that unit going to see a lot of playing time? Probably not, but they'll see some for sure. It's just an added boost. If that top power play unit for whatever reason doesn't get it done, that second unit gets out there for 30 seconds and does, it's great. Obviously it's better to see some power play time than none at all. But yeah, leaning back on some past playoff performances, these guys have been pretty good. The prices that, if I was just relying on playoff performance, then I think I'd be insane, but I'm not. I think it's just something to talk myself into them even more. Saad at 2,600 makes it very appealing. And then obviously the matchup is really good as well. So you factor all those things in together, price, past performance, and the matchup. Colorado 2 looks really, really solid tonight as well. From the Blues side of things, the Blues are a team that I never play in DFS almost ever. At the start of the season, I did play Schwartz, Shen, and Kyrou because they were just absolutely electric. They were on fire. But yeah, with this top Don line, which has been outstanding. I can't play St. Louis 1. The Avalanche just don't give up enough defensively. They're so good, and they're so good defensively, and that Blues are so just stagnant offensively that it's hard to really envision them having any success here, at least in game one. I think that the Blues will have a better chance. I think the Blues will have an opportunity to maybe hang with them a little bit in St. Louis. I think they're just going to have such a difficult time here in Colorado. So I'm probably going to stay away from the Blues almost entirely tonight. I just can't, if you look at the numbers here, I mean, when it's all red on the offensive side, that's bad. But when it's also all red on the defensive side for the opponent's team, that's really bad. That just means there's going to be no offense. I don't know where who's going to do anything. They might have 16 shots for all I know. So I just can't do it. Obviously they'll be very contrarian if you're building a ton of lineups and you want to find a way to fit them in, then go for it. I don't even know. I can't even sit here and tell you who to play. The second line, the Kadri line, looks like arguably their worst defensive line, even though they're still super good. So maybe the second line could have some success against them. I really don't know. It's just they don't look good on paper, any of these lines. But overall, the second line does grade out the best. So maybe you want to go a Tarasenko, Bozak mini stack to get different. That looks like probably the best option. If I had to play the Blues, that's who I would play tonight. They're cheap. Tarasenko at 4,700. He's not been the same player this year, but still pretty good hockey player. So if I had to play them, that's who it would be. Now, if we pop over to the big board here, just really quickly, Colorado 1 obviously grades out on top. Carolina 2, 1, number 2. Boston 2, number 3. Carolina 2 in 4th. And then Boston 1 in 5th. And Colorado 2, 6th. Nashville 1, 7th. So that is that. Basically, all the lines that I've talked about really targeting tonight, graded at the top. That's why we do this. So that's that. Now let's get over to the goalies here, and I'll check up what's going on in the comments section as well. Peter B says, Yost Donskoy mini is something I'll do in one of the lineups for sure. Yeah, I think it's fine. Going up against O'Reilly is going to be difficult, but again, if my matchups in the regular season don't hold, then things change entirely. But It's definitely something worth looking at. I just think that the second lineup provides a little bit more upside tonight. But Donskoy is still in that top power play unit. Still looks really, really good. So based on the goalie model, Alex Nedeljkovic grades out as the best goaltender to play this evening. I need to change Jordan Binnington's status because he is probable now. So Nedeljkovic was in the starter's crease. He was the first goalie off. All signs pointing towards him starting. However, Rod Brind'Amour would not commit to it. But I mean, the guy led the NHL in goals against average and save percentage this season. He's been great all year. There's really no reason for them to go to Peter Mrazek. He obviously has the more, postseason experience. But at the end of the day, Nedeljkovic looks like their best goalie. He should be in net tonight. They are the second biggest favorite on the slate. So he grades out exceptionally well. Grubauer looks really good as well. Obviously the biggest favorite on the slate. But as I just mentioned, I don't know where the offense comes from for St. Louis. So he might only see 17 shots tonight. And in that case, it's going to be difficult for him to, grade out all that well. Peter B.S. if it is Saros all the way, I think Saros is obviously an outstanding play at 7,500. He's going to see just so many shots. If for whatever reason the Hurricanes kind of go back to their old ways where they have trouble scoring, even though they vastly outshoot teams, just like Vegas did the other night, typical Vegas playoff fashion, then yeah, Saros could have a 42 save shutout like Cam Talbot did. So if you're building one lineup, I think Saros is obviously pretty risky because he could get shelled. But overall, he's just been outstanding. And he should turn in at least a pretty serviceable performance because he should just see a shitload of rubber tonight. So I think he's definitely fine at 7,500, especially, if in lineups, if you're building multiple lineups and you're fading Carolina in any of them, then Saros is an absolute no-brainer. But yeah, the price is definitely juicy on Saros at 7,500. And I will absolutely have some Saros exposure tonight. Craig Anderson at 7,900. I just don't know if I can go there. It's just too pricey for him. Obviously he played well, but I just can't. I can't get behind it at 7,900, especially with Saros priced at 7,500. And then to go up $400 to Nedeljkovic, it just makes too much sense. I don't love Rask either, but I do think the Bruins win this game. I do think the Bruins win this series. And if they're going to win the series, they're going to have to win this game most likely. So I don't love Rask. He's obviously not been that great all year. He's been fine, serviceable. He's not really a guy that, in recent years you've been able to just expect him to steal a game. He's not going to turn in that Marc-Andre Fleury performance from yesterday, I don't think. But he's still good enough to get the W tonight. And if they win 3-2, he'll be fine. Binnington, obviously super risky. But the one thing for sure you're going to get out of Binnington tonight is a ton of volume as well. To me, I think that Saros for $200 more has a little bit better chance of winning. He's just a better goalie overall. So I probably won't play a lot of Binnington because Saros is right there in price, and I think that his upside is a little bit better. But Binnington's obviously going to be the lowest on goaltender on the slate if you want to get crazy, and maybe he does go crazy and turns into a ridiculous performance and it wins you a ton of money, maybe. Overall, chances are, obviously, if you look at the odds here from Vegas, not a huge fan of Jordan Binnington tonight without David Perron. He's overwhelmingly the worst goaltending grade on this slate, so does not look good for him. Again, I don't have the D chart available today, but last night. Oh, I'm back. Could you guys hear any of that? Okay. Well, whatever. I'm coming up on 40 minutes anyway, so we'll cut it short tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. I'll break them down a little bit quicker. We'll get to more defensemen tomorrow. Because, you guys have been watching the show throughout the year. You know who to play. No, it froze. Okay. It did freeze. I don't know what happened there. The wheel started turning. Oh, I am back. All right, maybe I'll do defenseman really quick. Hamilton, 6,600. Obviously outstanding if you're going to be playing Carolina 1. At the top, there's not a whole lot that I really love. Obviously, like the top guys are outstanding, but overall, I'm not totally in love with the top of the board. If you want to start going down a little bit, I think somebody like Brandon Carlo is pretty solid at 2,900. If you want to play Boston 1 or Boston 2, he's a guy that tends to get the puck on net, blocks a fair bit amount of shots. At 2,900, Carlo is definitely one of my favorite deep punts. If you want to play Carrier at 3,100, he should see plenty of minutes on the second pair with Matthias Ekholm. The Predators are probably going to play that top four exclusively. That third pairing should see like 9 minutes tonight. So Carrier should play plenty at 3,100. I do like him as a one-off option. There is not a whole lot here. It's pretty much slim pickings at the bottom. I don't mind Jake Bean at 2,500. He's played more and more as the season has gone on. With Slavin returning tonight, he probably won't play quite as much, but he does see some power play usage. So I don't hate Jake Bean. Where is Brady Shea? Like, he's obviously cheap enough from Carolina. Slavin at 4,000 is way too cheap. He should play like 100 minutes tonight. You need some cheap D. You want to stack Colorado and Carolina 1. I think that, if you can fit them, obviously Slavin is one of the top options there to pair with some Carolina players. If not, Shea's fine. Bean's okay if you really have to go to the bottom. At the end of the day, going to the bottom of this list in the playoffs is fine because they all just block shots. Go with a guy like Brendan Dillon at 2,500. He's going to play 20 minutes. He's probably going to stand in front of a couple shots. You can play any of these guys. They're all putting their body on the line. Hakanpää at minimum price. He'll stand in front of the puck a couple times tonight. That's really all you're hoping for out of these bottom defensemen. But overall, it is fairly slim pickings tonight. Maybe you go, if you really need to get cheap, like if you want to play Carolina 1 and Colorado 1 together, Connor Timmins at minimum price is fine for Colorado. I don't know how much he'll play, but he should see enough minutes to at least warrant a couple points. But yeah, fairly slim pickings on a 3-game slate, but I've given you at least 7 or 8 guys that are worthwhile towards the bottom there. So at the top, obviously, the usual customers, you guys know who to play. Just stack them with the guys that you're playing to increase the upside, especially if it's a power play situation. So good luck tonight. Enjoy playoff hockey. I know I will. Enjoy some cold ones. We'll see you guys back here same time, same place tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern. So new time for the playoffs, but gives us a lot more time to build lineups. So see you guys here tomorrow.